Venezuela Insider. Today is January 25 of 2026. So yeah, well, apparently we are doing this every Sunday. And yeah, now, see, let's see how it goes. And yeah, we have some things to cover. Let's do a recap of the week. And let's check, yeah, not still getting used to this, doing live. This is something that I started to do just recently. And let's see how it goes. And some people actually like it. And yeah, well, offline, yeah, I like to be offline because I can, review my ideas. I have everything written down, the bullet points of each information that I need to share. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. Yeah, let's check here something. We're doing something, you know, watching, checking everything is all right. Okay, checking here, get to the point. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, dude. Yeah, have to wait. I'm a chatty person, so yeah. So I'm gonna start telling jokes. I'm gonna do like a Seinfeld. This will be like a Seinfeld episode. Yeah, a show about nothing. Well, anyways, before I was going to address how the Venezuelan economy works, and before that, I'm gonna address the news of the week. But before that, I want to address a mistake that I made. And yeah, I cannot live with my mistake. Unlike this terrible analyst about Venezuela that never been in Venezuela, they don't speak Spanish, know nothing about Venezuela. Usually are either socialists, communists, or pro-Russians, pro-China, things like that. Already, I'm undefeated against these guys like Mayweather. Yeah, but even Mayweather had some, some pushback, like when that fight with Manny Pacquiao or something. Yeah, I don't even have a Pacquiao. Yeah, just beating the crap out of these guys. And we have to address yet again John Kiriakou, that John Kiriakou, I did a couple of reactions. The first reaction was about the terrible things that he said about Venezuela and how we reached to this point. And he gave a couple of solutions, possible solutions that either they don't work or have been tried and that didn't work. So, of course, Kiriakou is someone very illiterate, very ignorant about Venezuela and the Venezuelan situation overall, gave terrible advice. The only thing that he said that it was useful is that this is before the operation against Maduro, if you see an aircraft carrier package going to the Caribbean, that's when you know that something's going to happen. That's the only useful contribution to, from his analysis. The rest is completely crap. Then I posted a video, was a pre-recorded video on Friday, just recently, one of the last videos, saying that maybe he's improving about Venezuela. And I reacted to an interview that he had with Piers Morgan. And that interview was just a couple of days before the special military operation, like the Russians like to say. And so the only credit that I can give him is that at least he wasn't Monday quarterbacking. And the reason, and Piers Morgan actually, I thought that he was improving, but actually I have to give more credit to Piers Morgan because Morgan, apparently he understands the situation way better than Kiriakou. And he gave a couple of surgical answers. And Kiriakou was obligated to give some coherent answers. And he gave actually a couple of coherent answers. about Venezuela just before the operation. So I thought it was credit of John Kiriakou, someone that I really like Kiriakou, by the way. I think that he is very intellectually honest, but not much intellectual. He's very idealistic, from I can tell. And he has a particular bias, pro-Russian, something like that, anti-Israel. Now, he can argue on those things. I mean, I don't have a dog on that fight. I mean, I don't like to discuss that much political bias because I like to be pragmatic as I can. And I'm not going to address that. I mean, it's not even this is not the topic of this channel. But he gets carried away by his particular pro-Russian, anti-Israel bias, and therefore ends up giving terrible analysis about Venezuela. He knows practically anything. So I published that video on Friday, throwing an olive branch to Kiriakou. But then he gave another interview on a different podcast just this week, and talking about Venezuela again. And I mean, it was so awful. I mean, it's going back to the square one. He really doesn't know anything about Venezuela. He doesn't know about economics, politics, yeah, sorry. I have some buggy internet where I'm sorry. I have some buggy internet where I'm right now. And anything about Venezuela, when he talks about the oil industry, I mean, he's frankly embarrassing because, I'm an expert. I'm a petroleum engineer. My undergrad is a petroleum engineer. And he's a CIA. I don't know. I mean, he used to work with the CIA. And honestly, he's terrible. He's a terrible analyst. I don't know if he was a hitman or a honeypot agent or something like that. I don't know, because, as an analyst, it's terrible. That's maybe the reason why the CIA let him go. And so, anyways, anything I've said, my last analysis about Kiriakou is terrible. It's a mistake that I made. I'm wrong. Kiriakou has no business talking about Venezuela. I already record just this week another analysis with the Professor Chiang, that he's very famous. I'm a big fan of Professor Chiang, but he knows nothing about Venezuela. He's terrible. His analysis about Venezuela is frankly terrible. He doesn't know that much about Latin America, Latinos, overall. He doesn't know anything about Venezuelans, that's for sure. And I did another analysis, another reaction, saying why he's wrong and he has no authority speaking about Venezuela. Other reaction that's coming this week is to Dr. Roy Casagranda. I'm a big fan of Casagranda. He's very interesting. He's a great speaker. And he talks about geopolitical history. I have learned a lot. The Roman Empire and World War II and the Crusades, things like that. But yeah, regarding Venezuela, he's very ignorant. First, he has a particular socialist left-leaning bias from what I can tell. And I'm just giving you the spoiler for that video. But yeah, don't trust Casagranda. And actually, don't trust anyone non-Venezuelan, because they don't know anything. They know very little. Because these analysts regarding geopolitics, economics, and whatever, these people don't know. Venezuela is a very particular country, even for Latin American standards. So what these people do is know very little about Venezuela. They take as proxies another cases that they know better. For instance, the people saying the next Iraq, the next Afghanistan or something, maybe they are experts on the Middle East, and basically they extrapolate that with Venezuela, and yeah, and also with the economics, they don't know how the Venezuelan economy works or is not working, and there is a reason why it's not working, and we explained this many times. Mostly is corruption, mismanagement, and mostly is all of these frictions unnecessary. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, bogey again. Okay, let's read some comments. Okay, I'll say get to the point. I was there in. My wife is from Miranda. Well, shout out to you. Blended Borders, and shout out to your wife, fellow Venezuelan. Another comment here. Hi, is it true that the Venezuelan petrol workers have received a large pay rise? I heard went from $5 to $1,200. Uh, well, no. Let me explain. First, let's address the $5 salary question, because it's a great answer, and the reason is that that is not completely true. What Since 7 years ago or so, the Venezuelan currency has been destroyed thanks to hyperinflation. So in Venezuela, according to the laws, the labor laws, you have a minimum wage. Well, like most countries have a minimum wage. And that particular minimum wage is established in the local currency. So when the hyperinflation just went to the moon, baby, basically that amount that used to be like $100 or $200 per month at some moment, it was destroyed and is pegged by the month. And when the Venezuelan currency got destroyed, basically that particular amount got devaluated to just a couple of dollars per month, like $5 per month, something like that. It's not exactly $5, it's actually less than that. What happened is that since the economy was already destroyed back then, and people, private individuals, and also you have to take into account that the Venezuelan government is the largest employer of the country. Around 5 million people depend on the government, either because they are public employees, including the oil workers, or they have to pay pensions and retirees and things like that. So that nominal amount, that is, let's say just for the sake of the conversation, $5 is basically almost nothing, is pegged to the debt obligations that you have with workers, either current workers or past workers that are now retirees. So a lot of people that has pensions and anything like that are pegged to that this nominal amount of $5 that is actually on the Venezuelan currency. Sometimes it's even less than that. So that's the, let's say, labor obligations. But in reality, the people who do actual work in the private sector, they have to pay in dollars, either straight up on USD or on the local currency, but pegged to the real amount on USD. Regarding the oil workers, and now I'm gonna answer the question, but I need to explain this first. Okay, sorry, the internet. Okay, sorry, the internet is buggy. Okay, let me finish. The employees, for instance, the PDVSA employees, they get technically the $5 salary, but they get a bunch of bonuses. And depending on the job occupation, the job, position that they have, usually they receive a bunch of bonuses that amount like $200, $300, $400, $500 on the local currency, depending, of course, of the type of employee. They also get bonuses, for instance, for childcare and healthcare. A handful of them get some mortgages. Actually, they have access to cheap credit to a small amount to buy, low-end properties in Venezuela. But still, in Venezuela, mortgage market is virtually non-existent. But a handful of them actually get these tiny mortgages, and they can aspire to buy a, low mid-end property. And yeah, so they actually are getting paid. I mean, they can get by, but that's it. Now, $1,200, that's for either a management salary, so just a handful of people make that, or people who are very, let's say, on drilling, maybe then they can make that, or the people employed by the oil multinationals like Chevron. Chevron pays something like that, like $1,000, $2,000 per month, something like that, with some benefits. Repsol from Spain and a couple of others, they may get that. Now, but it's not like everyone is getting paid those salaries. No, you specifically said, okay, sorry about it. With the internet today. By the way, this is not Venezuela's internet, so Let's see. Let's read a couple of messages. Cele, hola. Hi, Cele. Welcome. Sorry about the technical difficulties with the internet. Now, let's address a couple of things, the news of the week. The hydrocarbon law, basically the oil industry law in Venezuela. We know that one of the reasons, and one of the many reasons, why one of the reasons why the Venezuelan economy has been destroyed, 80% GDP collapse, and then a small rebound, a dead cat bounce since basically after COVID, is because, of course, the control that the government has on everything, the quote-unquote socialism. But it's more complicated than just socialism. The people that are usually from the right, now I'm bashing the left, starting bashing the left, let's bash the right a little bit. They say, oh, it's just socialism, so it's going to destroy the country. No, this goes beyond socialism. It's a particular mindset that these people have. Okay, and I'm not vouching for socialism, yeah, but still, yeah. Anyway, so the control of the state has on the oil industry. This is something that happened since the 70s, actually. With a president was very famous, very popular back then, called Carlos Andrés Pérez, or CAP, if you want to. And then with Hugo Chavez, got worse, and then with Maduro, got worse, and whatever. Right now, the law, just before the change, the hydrocarbon law that was signed this week, the Venezuelan state-owned company, PDVSA, needed over 50% of stake on a joint venture with an oil multinational, like, for instance, Chevron. But right now, that requirement has been reduced, and also the royalties for the oil revenue went from a little bit over 30%, and right now is 15%. So it's very attractive for companies that are already in operating in Venezuela, like Chevron, like Repsol, but companies like ExxonMobil, that they got expropriated twice in the country, and they basically lost their investment here. Sorry. They still, they say, too little, too late. They want to see a complete change on the structure. Basically, the people who are ruling the country, they want to see other people ruling the country. People like, let's say, Maria Corina Machado, just to put in a name. Delcy right now, apparently, she's playing ball, and actually the brother of Delcy, Jorge, he's the House Speaker, and he was the one who passed the law. So good on that. Still, we're still having some issues, so the recovery is not going to be quick. We need to establish certain status quo. Right now, the situation is, is hit and miss. Yeah, that's why we are doing this coverage basically every single day of the situation. So here's how the Venezuelan economy works. You have the current account, what in economics, also known as the trade balance that Trump hated, and that's why always tariffs, because the US has a negative current account balance. They import way more to the amount that they export to the rest of the world, and Trump doesn't like that. He sees the economy as a zero-sum game. Well, in Venezuela, historically, basically every year, maybe it's a hiccup one year or another, but basically the last 100 years, Venezuela has a surplus on the current account. That means that Venezuela exports to the world more than they import. Venezuela, of course, most of the export is oil and things like that. Basically, the exports of the oil industry. And that money comes to the, enters, that surplus enters to the country, is sadly mismanaged by the local authorities and spread out, trickle down. This thing trickle down, trickle down economics. This thing, the oil surplus actually trickles down, even in the worst circumstances. Trickles down to the rest of the economy. However, what happens is the local authorities have all of the incentive to undermine the rest of the industries in order to have some social control. and control the oil revenue. Unlike other countries, most countries in the world, they get is the tax revenue. And that's the money that they get to manage. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan government, regardless if Chavez, Maduro, or and the people before them, they manage is the oil revenue. That is more important than the tax revenue. That is, by the way, the taxes are terrible. I mean, depending on how you see it, taxes deserve a video of its own. Basically, you have two tax structures. The one for brick and mortar taxes, as I like to call them, a bunch of state and municipal taxes, and of course, the federal government tax. And you have like offshore taxes for things that are not, not brick and mortar, like, like a bakery or a hardware store or something like that. Anyway, so every time that you see oil investment, oil operations, whatever, in the country, you are gonna get the you're gonna get more money on the street, and that trickles down. You see more commercial, the shopping malls, the beaches, the real estate, the restaurants, whatever. But of course, the non-oil economy and the commercial activity is just like 10-15% of the overall Venezuelan GDP that is mostly tied to the oil GDP. But even the oil industries, the oil employees, they need housing, they need food, they need shelter, they need clothing, they need entertainment, whatever. And the problem is that thanks to most of the frictions, political, social frictions that we had on the past decade and a half, and also the currency control, that is something very important. I'm not going to address it that much today. Let's say, just for the sake of conversation today, that the Venezuelan economy is de facto dollarized. It's not exactly like that, but yeah, that deserves another explanation of its own. Well, the frictions hinder the commercial activity, and then the corruption and mismanagement, and also the political instability hinders the oil economy. Right now, since the political situation is getting better, yeah, still a weird situation, but the US is going to be way more involved. That years ago was involved Russia and China, that they didn't do that much. I mean, they had some interest, but I mean, it's not that important. And even with Russia and China, Chevron and Repsol, actually, they were more important than, for instance, Gazprom and Rosneft and Lukoil or the China National Oil Company or whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, the Western players are the ones, even regardless of the political situation, the ones are more involved. Now we are doing it just, official. And that's about it. Well, the reason why the Venezuelan was throughout the 20th century, and starting actually the 21st century, Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America on GDP per capita, is because you had a sustained oil economy, roughly 3 million barrels of crude oil per day. Right now is a little bit less than a million, give or take a million, poised to reach 1.5 million by the end of the year, by the way. That 3 million and all of the, the operations and the transactions added to that 3 million barrels that trickle down to the rest of the economy, and you have industries, you have commercials, you have real estate. The stock market, by the way, don't go crazy with the stock market. It's not that important on the Venezuelan economy, so don't go crazy with that. I mean, so take it with a grain of salt, because I'm seeing even Polymarket and all of these, Wall Street Twitter accounts putting like it's a big deal. That's not a major thing. The Venezuelan stock market is like, it's very, the market cap is very low. So, I mean, it plays a second fiddle. It's not important. Anyways, so every time, the main point is this. You see, if you follow me on Twitter, some of you follow me on Twitter, some of you only watch me on YouTube, and some people do it both ways, on both platforms. And well, in the rest of the platforms, I have an Instagram account, but it's mostly for personal stuff. What else? My website, of course. If you wanna hire me for a one-on-one consultation, do it over there, VenezuelaInsider.com. Well, anyways, in Twitter, I retweet or I just tweet a lot regarding every time there is an oil deal going on. Chevron, Exxon, some of the oil traders like Vitol, they think with Russia and China. Now they think with the oil quarantine by the U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean. They are still seizing oil vessels that don't go straight to the US. The ones that want to go to China or a place like that, yeah, that's about it. Also, the free oil that used to go to Cuba now is being sold at a full price on the open market, and the money, some of the money is coming back to the Venezuelan economy. Those are great news, by the way. Very good news, very excellent news, you know. Well, that's great news because that money comes back to the country. Something that started happening basically since the past week and a half, when Trump announced that the money is going back to the country on reasonable conditions that will be managed by private banks and private institutions and not straight by the Venezuelan government. That's a great news. Well, the currency exchange in Venezuela, when, basically the local currency stabilized. That I know I said that the country is de facto dollarized, but still the local currency, the Bolivar, has an important, burden on the Venezuelan economy. It's a weird thing to explain, but yeah, if you're coming from abroad, just have in your mind that you're going to pay in USD. But the local people has to use the currency, and there are some distortions and the supply chains. I mean, deserves an explanation of its own. But that's a good news, that the Venezuelan currency got stabilized basically since this thing started, with US managing and selling at a full price without sanctions, without discounts, the Venezuelan oil. And that's another good news, that apparently the sanctions are going to be lifted, the oil sanctions. Remember, there are two tiers of sanctions. The sanctions against the Venezuelan government goes to PDVSA and the oil industry and a couple of other government-tied industries. And you have the other set of sanctions that are against individuals within the Venezuelan government, roughly 200 people and their families. Well, anyway, so some restrictions, and also the sentiment is very positive right now. The real estate went way up. I'm seeing a bunch of listings, 50 and 100% up compared to the last year. So the real estate market is going up, but still a weird situation on the social side, but on the economic side is very positive. I mentioned this a couple of times already, that according to my favorite economist, Asdrúbal Oliveros, and I listened to him just a couple of hours ago, that at least 10% GDP growth we're gonna have on the next year, and most likely compounded if the situation stays, and a 30% GDP growth, oil GDP growth on this year, basically a third. So we are poised to see very quickly a Venezuelan economy that right now is roughly 110, 120 billion USD on GDP. It's going to be 150 million economy. So way less than the 400 billion that we had like a decade ago or so. Collapsed 80%, of course, over 80%, reached a bottom of 43. And right now we're poised this year to close on 150 billion. So almost 4x compared to the real bottom, to the bare bottom of the situation just before COVID, but still a long way to go. The Venezuelan economy on normal circumstances should be a $500 billion GDP economy. And with decent management, can reach the trillion mark. Only like 20 economies in the world are over $1 trillion. Venezuela can reach the threshold in a decade. And because it's very simple, you just have to stop destroying. And because the Venezuelan economy, de facto, should be a $500 billion economy. So basically, in order to finish this idea, is that when some of the restrictions, not all of the restrictions, most of the restrictions and the frictions are released. We have about 15 years of pent up demand, and then it's going to trickle down, and we're going to have compounding 2-digit GDP growth years. Bam. And that's it, because it's all, you just need to stop destroying. That's it. And also, what I like about the Venezuelan economy, I've said this many times, and the people that have been already in Venezuela know this. Or, for instance, I'm sorry, you are, I forgot your name. The guy, he is married with a woman from Miranda. Okay, if you know your wife, you know the consumer behavior of your wife. Sadly, you already know this, but you know it. If you know, you know that. I hope that your wife doesn't have access to your credit card account. Venezuelans have a very particular consumer behavior. Venezuelans are not frugal, are not stoic. They like spending. They love spending. They have a mindset. Actually, one of my followers said this the other day. Está barato, dame dos. It's cheap. Give me, give me two. So Venezuelans love to spend, love to show off. At some moment in the 80s, they for the weekend and go to Margarita Island basically every time they can. There were 50 flights from Caracas to Margarita Island on per day, over 50, like 52, 53, something like that. Even, and this is just, I mean, just an anecdotal. Remember the Concorde flight, the supersonic flight was a very luxurious flight from Air France and British Airways that only had like 6, 8 destinations in the world. New York, Paris, and London, they are the bases. From New York and a handful of other places. Well, Caracas was one of the main flights back then, on the 80s. So, I don't know, not necessarily we're going to go back to those days, but the days are going to be better because, I mean, if you destroy everything, you have nowhere but up to go. Okay, let's answer here another question. Let's see. Gary, thank you for your answer. Do you think Venezuela will become safer in the next 5 years? Well, Venezuela has been safe, actually. Venezuela was very safe until one of the safest places in the world until the mid-70s when we got Colombian immigration. And I'm not saying the Colombians are bad people. Yeah, let's support them. Let's send King Cristino or something. No. What happened is that back then in Colombia spent the whole 20th century basically on a civil war with the guerrillas and the drug dealers and whatever, and Pablo Escobar and things like that. Well, sadly, a lot of the drug dealers and common criminals that Colombia had came to Venezuela on the mid-70s, and that trickled down, and by the early 90s, Venezuela became very dangerous, actually. One of the reasons, actually, why Hugo Chavez was kind of popular, that still, the common crime became worse with Hugo Chavez. Some people speculate that Hugo Chavez did it on purpose in order to control the middle class, you know. And yeah, okay, I'm not going to address if that's right or wrong, but indeed happened. Until the midst of the 2010s, when Maduro was already in charge, and he did something like a Bukele-like operation. Yeah, it was even worse than Bukele, actually. And that reduced significantly the crime rate in Venezuela. And actually, Trump himself quotes the statistic every time. He did it on his inauguration day, and he did it throughout his campaign. He said, Venezuela is 66% safer because they send their criminals, yada, yada, and train their hour, whatever. Well, that statistic is true. It's 60-something, 72. Trump always, likes to prop up the numbers. Well, that already happened. Anyways, yeah, Venezuela is way safer. And the other thing about Venezuela, I always say this because Venezuela is way safer than Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. I've never been in Mexico, but I've been in Colombia and Brazil several times. Venezuela is safer than Colombia and Brazil regarding street crime. So Venezuela is way safer on that regard. And the crime rates, most of the crimes happen on a vacuum. On the slums, on the very ugly places, in Caracas, and some crazy tourists love to go to those places. I never been in those places. And actually, I was born in Caracas. Anyway, so those ugly places or very remote places, in things dealing with drug deals or, criminal, stuff that criminal gangs do. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can go to OVV, Observatorio Venezolano de Violencia, or Venezuelan Violence Observatory. You just Google OVV Venezuela and you're gonna get it. Now, the problem with Venezuela regarding safety, so on the street you're gonna be fine unless you go or a very dangerous neighborhood or something like that. For the rest, Venezuela is very safe. The problem that is regarding the safety level is how random and arbitrary are the local authorities. I'm talking the local police officers or the local National Guard guys. Now, most of these people, at the end of the day, they are people, they are not bad people, they're not gonna do anything to you, but you have a bunch of police checkpoints, and randomly, one of these guys can start, randomly requiring very arbitrary things like, hey, give me your documents, and you need this extra document that is not a requirement and whatever. And that's what makes Venezuela very uncertain. Not but uncertain. And bad things happen on these random encounters. And so, to your question, if the status quo changes, and that's the main thing that has to change regarding safety, how random are the local boots on the ground authorities? I think that's going to be reformed. So I think it's going to be Venezuela is way safer than most people think. I'm not saying it's completely safe. The danger is that randomness and arbitrary. And if you fix that, Venezuela is going to be way, way, way safer. Yeah. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for your answer. My wife is Venezuelan. Yeah. We have a bunch of, we have a bunch of Venezuelan spouses here. Thanks for your answer. My wife is Venezuelan. We got married in Venezuela 15 years ago. We have lived in the UK the whole time and have 2 children. I'm hoping we can move back one day and be safe. Well, yeah, the other thing is that if you live in the UK, well, regarding safety, yeah, I don't want to, be attacked or anything like that right now and shut out my live stream. But yeah, I think it's gonna be a fairly simple decision if you want to move to Venezuela in just a couple of years. So you're gonna be okay, Gary, on that regard. Anyway, and real estate, we already covered real estate, but just laugh a lot. Yeah, thank you, Gary. Yeah, you're very cool. Well, going back to the real estate. Real estate is getting up. It's already up. It's not like it's poised to get up, or it's not that I'm projecting it's gonna get up. It's already up between 50 and 100%. I've said this many times that the bottom of the Venezuelan real estate market was on late 2018. I can pinpoint the exact moment of the chart, with technical analysis, like I'm a day trader or something. I can do that. After that, went up, then chopped during COVID, like year and a half, and then go back up. But also at the same time, what happened is that we got a K-shaped recovery. After 2018, the handful of more coveted markets are the ones who went way up. The east side of Caracas, Lecheria, then the nice areas of Margarita Island. I'm not the biggest fan of the real estate in Margarita Island. I love it. And by the way, it's going up, way up. I'm talking like 50, 100% right now, just overnight. But there are some couple of issues with Margarita Island. I say this every time to my clients. Also, you have 3 markets, depending on the neighborhood, on the area of the city. And then you have a bunch of markets that right now, they're still not on the bottom, but, grow very marginally. And you have potential on those markets. I mean, if you want to trade, the Venezuelan real estate market like it's crypto or something, there are like 5, 6 markets that I will go, a YOLO trade. Yeah, and actually I have a couple of things in mind to do with those markets. Actually, a couple of clients just nailed it, and they were doing some the due diligence on those markets. They are beautiful, but they need some work, and also you need some gentrification going on. Meanwhile, the nice areas are already gentrified, so it's not like some gringos with yoga pants finding themselves are gonna gentrify. No, it's already gentrified. Anyway, so that's regarding the real estate segment here on the live stream. And lastly, there are a couple of issues that I want to cover that are happening. I'm gonna do separate videos regarding this couple of issues. Yeah, the dating videos are going back. The Venezuelan dating videos. I released an international dating series, something that is as a passion project. I was in these couple of countries and decided, boots on the ground, just see what, get some intel, boots on the ground, like I like to do, and do some reconnaissance and record my own analysis on those markets. I went to Sweden. Today's video is on Estonia. I went to Dubai actually and asked the people how's dating over there for an expat or whatever. And we're gonna publish the videos already recorded. On Sweden, you have the other Scandinavians, Norway. I haven't recorded the Norway. Yeah, I have, just the draft. And Denmark, Finland, Poland, great, great market. Poland, went to Malaysia actually, and I did some, a little bit of a dating market. I speak everything done with my peers over there, and the information that I got straight, from the source and my empirical experience, plus, the macro experience, like I like to do. Okay, so anyone here already check out the video on Estonia, please? Please, if you haven't, go and check that later. And yeah, I think I had some fun recording those, specials. And follow me on my second channel, Venezuela Insider Plus, because that's the place where I'm gonna put the videos not related, the more, laid back stuff, like, travel, dating, social situations, things like that. Just random things, and not necessarily, the meat and potatoes of the channel, economics, geopolitics, whatever, taxes, tariffs, whatever. Anyways, okay, I have to address something regarding the Venezuelan people. I've said this many, many times, is that Venezuelans are the least racist and xenophobic people that you can encounter. Venezuelans, they don't care about if you are black or if you're white, if you are Jewish or Muslim or whatever. Honestly, they don't care. The two things that the Venezuelan people care is socioeconomic status. The only discrimination that the Venezuelans have is socioeconomic status, but it doesn't matter if you're black or whatever. Or if you are, I don't know, indigenous or whatever. I mean, that, that woke culture stuff and social justice that in Venezuela is nonsense. Nobody cares about it. Well, some people in Caracas that are poor, some lesbians or something like that in Caracas, but for the rest, nobody cares. And the other thing is that something that I'm seeing is the Venezuelans are not xenophobic at all. They like people from abroad. We have a term in Venezuela called pastelero, kind of like a bandwagoner, something like that, for other countries. But Venezuelans have become more nationalistic on the past, like 10, 15 years. And yeah, let me get some water, please. Something I'm seeing is more xenophobia on social media. So more, anti-foreigner. It's not anti-American because, I mean, if you think that the Trump special military operation was unpopular, that was the polls that I got say something completely different. So that goes to you, pro-Russian, pro-Chinese, anti-Israeli analysts. Yeah, dude, you forfeit the game because you already lost. Well, anyways. But for many reasons, Venezuelans are becoming more xenophobic. They are demanding very strong requirements for visiting Venezuela. The xenophobia is going towards mostly to Colombians. That I mean, I love Colombia. I love Colombia. I love Colombian people. But in Colombia, you have a lot of. In Colombia, you have something that happens in Colombia. Like half of the population are very cool people, very smart people, or whatever, and the other half are like, I'm gonna say something that another YouTuber said recently about Colombia. They are Colombians. Half of Colombians are unburdened by deeper thoughts. The and what happens is that these people are not very analytical. And they honestly blame why Colombia is Colombia is a beautiful country with a lot of problems. Those problems are self-inflicted. The guerrilla, the drug dealing, the prostitution, whatever, and they blame it on Venezuelans. I mean, the nerve of these people, Colombians to Venezuelans, that Venezuelans actually went that have been sent to Colombia. Anyway, now with Colombia, we Venezuelans and Colombians have this particular, frenemy relationship. We love Colombia actually, but we have some tough love. We love Colombia, and a lot of Colombians also love Venezuela, but also some Venezuelan assholes, I have to say. They do bad things in Colombia, and we have a lot of Colombian assholes, and the gloves off right now, and also talk crap about Venezuela, things that they don't know and they are mistaken, and whatever. So that's the first thing. But the countries I'm seeing that the average Venezuelan is having more xenophobic tendencies are Peru and Chile. Peru is, let's be honest, a terrible country that, okay, has some cool things, but yeah, it's Peru. And they are blaming, now, the thing that I have to say is Peru received like 1 million Venezuelans in a year. So it was a lot. And then closed everything, and the dumb people from Peru are blaming their situation on Venezuela, like Peru was Switzerland or something before those million Venezuelans. Most of these million Venezuelans are actually great people, hardworking people, but they were also the poorest people. And from that 1 million Venezuelans, like a couple of thousand, so 2 or 3% are, very terrible people, I have to say. But Peruvians started playing Venezuela. But they don't remember that in Peru, they had something called Sendero Luminoso. That is a Marxist terrorist organization. It is. You can Google it if you want to, or you can have a Peruvian friend if you have one. And these guys, they send their Marxist terrorists to Venezuela at some moment. And they sent also a bunch of migrants, not at 1 million, but they sent a bunch of migrants. So they don't remember, the Latino, especially let's say the lower 50% of the Latinos are very short-minded. They don't know anything about history, politics, or whatever. They just, get by, and you get that xenophobia tendency. Anyways, Peruvians require tourist visa to Venezuelans, and actually the Venezuelan government, with Maduro, that happened a few years ago, now requires Peruvians a visa for Venezuela. So yeah, a tit for that. Same thing with Chile. Chile, actually, the situation in Chile was very great because Venezuela sent their best people to Chile. They're young professionals that they had no opportunity, like 10 years ago in the country. Professional work and, white-collar jobs or business opportunities or whatever. Yeah, Chile, regarding business, okay, it's okay. It was way better than Venezuela. I give them that. But then the xenophobia, the Chileans are very, resentful and ignorant people. Also, back on the bad days of Chile, first they had a communist president called Allende. He destroyed the Chilean economy. Chile was at the same level as Haiti back then. And then a right-wing dictator named Pinochet, he killed Allende and started killing communists. Yeah. And the ones that they did not got killed, they escaped to Venezuela. And yeah, but Chileans forget that. And also, well, anyway, after those horrible events by this left-leaning communist president, then the right-wing dictator, that both are terrible, they forget all of these things. So now there is a bad blood between Venezuelans and Chileans. And right now, Chileans also are required a visa in order to visit Venezuela, and we Venezuelans are required a visa to go to Chile. Same thing with the Caribbean islands. Because the Caribbean islands, the governments of those Caribbean islands are mercenaries. Basically, they are, they sell themselves to the highest bidder. So most of the Venezuelan people feel betrayed by the Caribbean islands, starting by the Dutch Caribbean islands, Aruba, the ABC Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, and all of these, San Lucia and whatever, these, the ones that, the CBI passport islands. So Venezuelans have bad blood against the Caribbeans, and this gonna manifest in xenophobia against Caribbean people. And also to other governments that, depending on political reasons and whatever, like Brazil, Venezuelans really dislike Lula da Silva, the current president of Brazil. He's a left-leaning, BRICS guy or whatever. So anyway, and some of that xenophobia, thanks to the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, and also is getting some anti-American sentiment thanks to Kristi Noem. So some Venezuelans, by the way, the U.S. citizens already require a tourist visa in order to visit the country. So you're going to see some xenophobia against Americans thanks to Kristi Noem, not thanks to Trump, thanks to Noem on that regard. And a handful of other situations that happened, since the crisis. For instance, recently an issue with Iceland. A handful of Venezuelans migrated to Iceland a few years ago. That got some bad blood over there. Anyways, so be prepared for that. But still, for the most part, Venezuelans are very friendly and they are good getting along with other people. And something I wanted to address. Okay, well, I need to go now. Well, thank you for being here, Gary. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Anyway, and the last thing we're going to address is, I'm going to do a complete video about it, but is the passport bros. Yeah, well, the passport bros are going to get the short end of the stick in Venezuela. I don't think that Venezuela will become passport bro friendly. And passport bros, here's why. If you're looking at a place like Thailand or the Philippines or Medellin before it got too gentrified, no, Venezuela is not going to be like that. First, Venezuela is expensive. And so if you're coming with a tight budget, I'm seeing some people, some hippies doing that. And by the way, if that's you, you do you. But the passport bros are not going to do well, first on that reason. In order to have a very good standard of living in Venezuela, you need some, it's going to be cheaper, of course, that in the US or London or Dubai or whatever. But for the rest, you need a certain threshold in order to really enjoy Venezuela and have the luxuries that the country has to provide, can provide. Anyway, so that's the first reason. The second reason, most important, we're going to talk about the dating market. Okay, the dating market in Venezuela is not as great as most people think. I've done many analyses on it. Yeah, boots on the ground. And since, I was way more positive like 5 years ago or so, and you can check my early videos about dating in Venezuela, I was very hyped about it, but then the next few years and then the last year and a half, Venezuela is not a great dating market, I have to say. I have to be honest. I'm gonna say a couple of silver linings regarding dating in Venezuela, but the dating market in Venezuela is actually it's not gonna be great. It's a winner takes it all. First, the average market is not great. Remember that in order to have a good dating market, you need good demographics. After the 8 million migration that we got, the diaspora, we lost, most of that people were young people. So our demographics got wrecked by that my emigration. So the people left the country. That's one thing. Other thing is that you got a great mix in Venezuela. Venezuelan women, they know how to take care of themselves, and also we got a great mix. We have Italian descendants, not Italians, Italian descendants, Middle Eastern descendants, also the First Nation descendants, the Indians. Yeah, let's put it like this. Okay, we have some Afro descendants, yeah, in the background. Yeah, and some people love the brown sugar or whatever. Okay, we got it. We got a bunch of, mulatas, nice, beautiful mulatas. And anyway, so basically it was plenty to go around. You were very happy back then as a man on the 90s, early 2000s until the mid-2010s. It was a great dating market. However, two things happened. Venezuela has always been unequal. So, and since the past, let's say, 7 to 8 years, Venezuela has become one of the most unequal nations on the world. According to a survey, I mentioned this a bunch of times, that Venezuela could be the second most unequal nation in the world, just behind South Africa, the place where the apartheid happened. Anyways, this is on economics. Now, what happened is that the Venezuelan females, what they prioritize is socioeconomic status. We know the triad regarding dating. Socioeconomic status, physical looks, and quote-unquote game. In Venezuela, most men actually have good game. They are purple pill, they have good game, but from the rest, they are blue pill, if I put it on manosphere terms. On physical looks, it's important, and I'm not going to say it's not important, but the issue is that it's more important the socioeconomic status. By far, it's the most important thing. And in Venezuela, most of the people that have socioeconomic status are what we call, quote-unquote, enchufados. Rich people that are rich thanks to the relationships that they have to the government, because in Venezuela, making money from scratch is virtually impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's virtually impossible. Under the previous status quo, of course, with Chavez and Maduro. So most of the rich people are enchufados. Not only that they are rich, is that they don't need to do anything special to be rich. Anyways, I'm not gonna bash on the enchufados that much. But the point is that the handful of enchufados, Venezuelans are not poor, are impoverished. It's a completely different concept. So most people in Venezuela, over 90% of, let's say over 80% of people are broke. You have then like 20% of people that are getting by, have some sort of, some sort of middle class lifestyle, and that's how they live. Okay, but compared to that fraction of a percent that the enchufados represent, those enchufados live like, like Silicon Valley founders, like Middle Eastern sheiks, like the sheik of Dubai, like the prince of Saudi Arabia or something like that. They live luxury cars, the Lambos or whatever, luxury travel, private planes, yachts, Balenciaga, you name it. These people live on complete abundance. And most of the eligible bachelors, what they do is go towards them. So you have this male enchufado. He has usually a wife. Now, because enchufados are not dumb regarding dating, they have a wife, usually the one that was with him when he was broke and just paid for the plastic surgery for the wife or the long-time girlfriend or something like that. And then have a rotation of, of sugar babies. Maybe they have the wife and then have a girlfriend on the side, a side chick, and then have a bunch of side chick. So most women are competing with the attention of these enchufados. And also, you have another cohort of men, the chats, that in Venezuela it works differently. Usually, but the typical cliché, the personal trainer on the gym, or the musician, and of course you have the typical deadbeats that women love. The bad boy, criminal, whatever, on a motorcycle or whatever. So basically, those are the ones women right now in Venezuela, especially the Venezuelan Gen Zers, females. They are circling on the enchufados, the chats, and those bad boys, the malandros, as we call them in Venezuela. And of course, there are women who have brain and date good guys or whatever. But let's be honest, in most countries that doesn't happen. In Venezuela is not the exception. So basically, if you come here from abroad, if you're a passport pro, you are going to compete with the enchufados. There are millionaires. In some cases, they are billionaires. So I'm talking, you are competing like a guy, I'm talking like Elon Musk or someone like that. I mean, not Elon Musk, but let's say someone like, I don't know, I mean, they are not that old. Let's say Mark Cuban. You're competing with a bunch of Mark Cubans, something like that. Anyway. And then you have, of course, local celebrities, local singers, local whatever, and you have to compete with those. Now, two silver linings about Venezuela regarding dating. The first thing, Venezuelans are very friendly. So you're gonna go and you're gonna make friends. You have to be a complete, I'm sorry by the word, a complete asshole if you don't make a Venezuelan friend, because Venezuelans are very friendly. And eventually you are gonna make Venezuelan friends. For instance, I can compare dating Venezuela with Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe is great for dating, depends on the market. On Eastern Europe, that's why I did the international video series. For dating, I will say it's better than Venezuela. I mean, regarding the actual resource. Unless you are an enchufado. And if you're an enchufado, you're gonna do great in Venezuela. But anyways, but something that happens is that in Eastern Europe, it's very hard to make friends, make a network, or something like that. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, it's still fairly easy. So eventually, you're gonna make friends, and then your friends and your network, they are gonna introduce you some eligible bachelorettes. And that, even in the worst case scenario, will happen. You at least are gonna get some chances, but it's not gonna be as great as they used to be. This particular market in, like 10 years ago or so. That's one thing. The second thing that is great for the Venezuelan dating market is that the average, in Venezuela actually, Venezuelan women are not as pretty, on the whole, as a team, as a full roster, they are not as beautiful. And honestly, the average Venezuelan is not that beautiful. I mean, compared to a great dating market. But you have like a 20-25% that is great. And that 20-25% goes against the 20-25% in other countries like in Russia, in Brazil, in Sweden, or whatever. These, powerhouses for dating. Yeah, I went to those powerhouses and I cannot say it without a smile. It's awesome. Yeah, Venezuela has been awesome at some moments, at some points. Anyways, so you have that top 25% is great. Now, if you go on the bell curve distribution, you have the 8s, from 1 to 10, the women who are an 8 out of 10 on physical beauty. Venezuela has something that has the better 8 out of 10 ratio that I've seen in any country, and I've been in a lot of countries. Sweden or Brazil, whatever. Brazil and Colombia also have a great deal of 8s, but Venezuela is the best for 8. So if you want to date an 8 out of 10, in the US you need to be, Dan Bilzerian or something like that. Another terrible analyst about Venezuela, by the way, just saying. But yeah, okay, let's forget about it. Dan Bilzerian, of course, good looking, successful, whatever, very famous. So you need to be Dan Bilzerian, or you need to be Drake, or you need to be a DJ or whatever in order to date an 8 in the United States. In Western Europe, it's not as bad, still bad. London, I had some guy here that lives in the UK. He can tell me how he's dating an 8 in London. Actually, I haven't, the only time that I went to London, I did pretty okay in that regard. But yeah, I wasn't dating an 8 or something like that. But anyways, so you need to be very, 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 very special. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, right now, still the situation is due to change. You can date an 8 out of 10. You don't need to be the giga chat or super successful, but yeah, you need to be financially stable, mildly good looking, with good game, and with good networking, not just out of backing. Something that can happen. I mean, that's the silver lining. Yeah, so it's a bittersweet news for the passport bros if you are thinking about coming in Venezuela. Well, thank you very much yet again for this live stream, to being on this live stream. And we'll see each other throughout the week, of course. We publish daily videos. And of course, we're going to publish a video tomorrow. It's already recorded. And we're going to do another live stream next Sunday. So take care. Happy rest of the week. Yeah, I don't know how to close this.